Hello, 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 and welcome to Book Club Live to celebrate Juno Dawson's novel Wonderland. So, Book Club Live is a concept that we started doing in the real world. Remember that? A couple of years ago. But since lockdown, we've been really working to try and make Book Club Live work in a digital space, which is largely due to the talents of my producer, Dickon. Thank you, Dickon.
Hello.
I So Book Club Live works a little bit like this. I'm going to be in conversation with Juno for about 30 minutes, so do relax into that book chat. We then take a short break, around about 10 minutes, where you can refresh your crisps. Crisps are an essential part of lockdown, I'm finding. Get yourself a cup of tea or a glass of wine. I've actually made myself a non-alcoholic cocktail, which I'm going to be drinking through book club, because the whole point of book club is that it is supposed to be a little bit of a respite, somewhere to disappear into story, disappear into talking about books, and particularly this week a little bit of respite at the end of this week before we start the new week. After the break we come back, and then that's a real opportunity to talk to Juno, to put your questions, your comments and thoughts to her, and a really good chance to get involved. And we do really love people to get involved. I know some of you who are in the house tonight. Hello, Lisa H. I know you are there, and Sarah V. And also Julia R., who sent me these earrings. Thank you, Julia. So do use Dickon's chat function, which is right there. So please use that to ask any questions or put any comments in there. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Helen Bagnall. I'm the founder of Book Club Live, or co-founder of Salon London, Salon North, and the Also Festival. And they're all the same kind of idea. They're all designed to get us together with brilliant writers and authors and their books. And I've been talking to authors about their book for about a decade, so I will try to do a good show for you. So we are here to celebrate Wonderland, and I now will introduce you to Juno Dawson. So Juno is an award-winning, best-selling author. She's a queen of teen. I think this is her 16th book. You may know her from her fiction or her non-fiction. Her book Clean, or her book Meat Market, which is actually the winner of the 2020 YA Prize earlier this week. And also, together with Clean, Meat Market, and this book Wonderland, have all been optioned for film TV also this week. On her non-fiction, her short story anthology Proud won Book of the Year in the Visionary Honours for diverse and unrepresented voices. So it's quite a year for Juno. Welcome, Juno.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you really, really well. Juno, would you... Hooray! Would you normally be out on an author tour like Alice's mum at the moment?
Potentially, yeah. What have I missed out on so far? I've missed out on a trip to Helsinki Lit Fest. We've missed the Hay Book Fest. I think I'm supposed to be in West Cork any time now. YALC, the Young Adult Literature Convention, has just been cancelled. Edinburgh's been cancelled. So there will not be any touring for Wonderland, at least not this year, I wouldn't imagine.
So this tonight is really your kind of launch, really, a kind of celebration and a launch. Yes.
Yes.
We're getting what Helsinki couldn't. So thought it might be really, really nice as you're here, and as it's a launch, and as this is a novel, and I think this is only the second novel we've ever done in Book Club Live. So it'd be wonderful if you could set the scene for us and read to us.
Sure. I'm going to read from right at the beginning of the book. It's a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, as I'm sure we will discuss further. And well, I don't think I really need to explain too much. I'll just let the reading speak for itself. And so this is chapter 2. I don't know why I go from Grafton's office to the dorms, but I do. I've always been a day pupil, so the boarding house holds a certain exotic appeal. Dreams of Mallory Towers, midnight feasts, parental abandonment and all that. I'm quite sure that those of us who get to go home at the end of each day are considered less hardy than those who bond over bleary-eyed, top-knot canteen breakfasts. Oh, I'd have loathed it. Not only does the mere thought of communal showers make my stomach spasm, but I've been known to visualise killing up to 6 people each morning before breakfast. Pupils at St Agnes are homed in houses, homely. The east wing's for Wenlock and Haydn, the west wing for Cullamore and Bloom. As artsy types, both Bunny and I are in Bloom. Sixth formers have more private rooms, and Bunny shares with just one other girl in room D14. I know because I looked it up after last week. The door is locked. I rather suspected it might be. I knock, then rest my forehead on the cool wood. What was I thinking? That the door would be wide open and I'd find a secret clue, meant only for me that somehow everyone else, including the police and Miss Grafton, had somehow missed. Well, why not? It happens in a lot of my mother's novels. If this were a novel, I'd use a hairpin to pick the lock. But this is not a novel. At the very most, it would be a sentence within one. I press my cheek to her door. I want to smell her again. Shea butter and menthol cigarettes. Bunny, are you in there? I knock again. The thing with intrusive thoughts is how goddamn intrusive they are. I picture her, naked, blue and grey, washed up on the bank of the Thames. Blubber flesh, swollen and bloated, lips purple and split. Her glazed eyes stare at nothing. Fish counter girl on ice flakes. I shake my head. It's not real, and my imagination isn't always my pal. I steady myself against her doorframe and take a deep breath. I'm fine. Resigned, I slump downstairs to the Bloom common room. Most girls are in sixth period by now, and only a couple of uppers, both crazy rich Asians who have accessorised their uniforms with Balenciaga, are playing on their phones in front of the fire. I wonder where Dinah is. Sixth period, she has classics, which is where I should be according to my timetable. But Latin is all Greek to me, and I can think of far better uses for my tongue. I'm about to leave when I see the pigeonholes. My little slot is overflowing with flyers, invites from various societies, newsletters, and important notices, which clearly weren't that important, since I've squarely ignored them without consequence. Again, I'm sure I'm not the first to check Bunny's pigeonhole for vital clues, but I can't seem to resist. I think back to last week. Alice, I think I'm in trouble. It has to be worth trying. It's always worth a try. The pigeonholes are sorted alphabetically by surname, and I find hers. Bunny has been at St Agnes since her parents went through a very public divorce a few years back. Her father, a publishing magnate, lives in New York. Her mother, Miss America back in the day, replaced Vicodin with crystals and splits her time between New Age cults and rehab from what I can gather. It's empty. Anything left in here, I imagine, has been taken by Grafton. Still, I reach inside anyway. I feel the wood at the back of the cabinet and am about to give up when my fingertips trace something stuck in the side. I try to scrape it out with my nails, but it's stubborn. It's probably some charity campaign from years ago, Antonella Hemming's food drive for refugees or some such. It feels glossy though, waxed. I work it loose and pull it free. Oh, after all that, it's just a lousy playing card someone has scribbled on in black marker. And it says, Wonderland, the 23rd of the 5th. It's the Queen of Hearts.
Oh, an intriguing clue.
Intriguing clue.
And it's that intriguing clue that leads Alice to believe that something's not quite right with the disappearance of Bunny, and sort of fakes being Bunny to get into this party Wonderland, which she disappears into, and that is her finding her way through Wonderland is the rest of the story. Congratulations on Wonderland, Juno.
Thank you very much.
So Wonderland is a very fast-paced, very up-to-date adaptation of Alice in Wonderland. But how did the idea of doing an adaptation of Wonderland come about in the first place?
It all started, I love it when you can really clearly pinpoint where an idea started, because sometimes it's not so easy. But this one was very definite. I was touring Clean. We did a tour called Clean Down Under, which I still think is hilarious. And we did Sydney, Melbourne and Christchurch in New Zealand. And while I was in Melbourne, I had quite a bit of downtime. And I met up with a friend who lives out there now. And he was like, oh, there's meant to be this Alice in Wonderland exhibit on at ACCA, which is the Australian Centre for Cultural Arts, which is a very cool space, still like the South Bank Centre, I guess. And it was an absolutely beautiful exhibit. It was actually all about visual representations of Alice, from the original photographs of little Alice Liddell to the original illustrations, all the way through to the Disney film, and the impact on pop culture as well. So things like pop videos, perfume ads, like films like The Matrix, and I started to think, it's so funny how we all have this idea of who Alice in Wonderland is, even if you haven't read the original, the Lewis Carroll version. And actually, I think a lot of people haven't. We all know kind of what she looks like and who she is and what she does and the journey that she goes on. And I thought it would be really interesting that if I sort of adopted those iconic characters, it would be like a thought experiment for me to see, what is it that I do? Because, everybody knows the characters. It's Cheshire Cat and the Queen of Hearts. So it was really fun. So I didn't have to create really any characters. And by having it so structured, I was able to sort of figure out the ingredients that I bring. And I think that's something that I think all authors should be doing, which is trying to work out what is your flavour.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You're saying that in talking about how many Alices there are, and I had a look at the exhibition. There's a video still of all the representation of Alice. It's a real tour through the character. But I feel like I could tell you 100 details about the story of Alice, but I don't think I've ever read it.
No, and I think it's quite difficult to read. I mean, it is of its time, this idea of nonsense. And that was sort of in vogue at the time that Lewis Carroll was writing. I mean, we know that Lewis Carroll was incredibly problematic, but it was gibberish by and large. But what he created was something so timeless, this idea of, a little girl who falls through a portal and finds herself in a world of fantasy where the normal rules don't apply. And that structure has been replicated many, many times over. From, you could even compare it to something like Nightmare on Elm Street, where a girl finds herself in a world where the usual rules don't apply. And this is, I think a lot of people have adapted this text. But no two of them are the same, and that's the thing. She's such a blank canvas.
She is a blank canvas. Do you think it's fair to say that almost every generation reworks Alice in Wonderland to tell the stories of their time?
Potentially, yeah. I think I know sort of, at its most basic, I guess you could compare my version to Skins or Euphoria, but I was reading just yesterday a sort of oral history and Entertainment Weekly of the film Heathers, and it really struck me how much that film has hugely underpinned all my novels. And so I think that there's lots. I suppose this version of Wonderland, it's like 80% sort of Alice in Wonderland, but then there's all sorts of other influences as well. And so I suppose each retelling of Alice, the various people have brought a little bit of themselves to the project. I think the Tim Burton adaptation for Disney a few years back, you could see sort of what it was he wanted to do. And obviously Johnny Depp clearly had some input into expanding the character of the Mad Hatter as well. But I think, like I've said, it's almost like you are borrowing a set of toys, and then it's up to you to decide what you want to do with them.
Yeah, and it was almost so it was a freeing experience to work with all of those toys rather than kind of baggage that you had to accommodate.
Yeah, it was. So last year or 2 years ago, I wrote a Doctor Who novel for the BBC, and that was really hard because that was, again, it was like borrowing a set of toys, but you couldn't do anything with them. Like, you had to give them back in pristine condition, and that's why, when you're writing a Doctor Who book, the best thing to do is just create a load of your own characters, because then you can kill them. There's no way I could have injured Yasmin and then, because it just wouldn't have meshed with the TV series. Whereas Alice in Wonderland is so timeless and, importantly, copyright free, that I was able to I didn't have any fear or reticence about changing the characters beyond all recognition. And obviously, some of them have just been changed a little bit, but some of them have been they're completely my own invention.
Yeah, you mentioned Heathers, and I think we talked about some other kind of high school dramas that that we both kind of like really liked, and I just wondered, it definitely is as well as have got all this. It's a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, but it is also a high school drama as well. And
Yeah.
I wondered if you were a real fan of that genre, and if that had been, kind of an influence in it as well. Because the main characters are all at school together. Bunny and Alice are at St Agnes, this exclusive private school.
So I sort of started this story, although they're all very loosely connected. I started this story in Clean 3 years ago, which is also partly takes place at St Agnes. And I love this school. I didn't go to a boarding school, so I'm fascinated by them. I'm sure if you did go to one, they were just terribly boring, but I think they're really fascinating. But that's what I grew up on. I grew up on Beverly Hills 90210 and Dawson. And when I started Gossip Girl, I would have been maybe 23, 24 years old. So I was definitely an adult, but I could not get enough of Gossip Girl. I was just like, hook it to my veins. And I think there is a certain type of adult who enjoys a high school story. I still love Clueless. I still love Mean Girls. And we know Clean sold phenomenally well. Clean sold thousands and thousands of copies. And it wasn't teenage girls. It was women in their 20s and up. And so I think it's not for everyone. Like my mum doesn't love them, but I think there is a certain type of adult who still enjoys reading about high schools. And I think in a way that's because high schools can so easily be made an allegory for society. And I think that's why high school stories can work really, really well, because at its heart, actually, this version of Wonderland, I think it's my most political novel by far. I think there's a lot in there about class and privilege. And rather than me telling a story about society or about the country, I've kind of fried everything down into this one high school, which kind of represents society. And that's much more easier to bite off.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much in there. I mean, and I was watching. I don't know if you've seen Little Fires Everywhere.
I've watched episode one at the moment.
That was made this year or last year, and they reference the young characters in it. Reference, is it Dylan and Brenda in 90210 as kind of the point at which they should sleep together, kind of like referring back to Beverly Hills 90210. And I think these series do have we do come back to them, and I want to mention that. But before we talk a bit more about YA and more high school dramas, I wanted to talk a little bit about Alice and the Alice that you created. She is so unrecognizable to I think as the one characteristic of being curious of the original Alice. Now you wrote Alice as a trans girl, but I think you said that I read that you wanted that to be a fact about Alice, not the story. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think there have been some great coming out stories in YA fiction. Lisa Williamson did one called And the Art of Being Normal. There's a great one by Alyssa Brugman called Alex as well. For me, I was more interested in telling stories about trans characters 5 or 6 years after they've come out, because I think as a tabloidy nation, we get very excited about coming out and we get very excited about the whole makeover section. But, being trans is not an episode of America's Next Top Model. After you've had the makeover, if you do, you go on and live a life. And Alice, she transitioned really young. She had a grip on her identity from a young age. And so sort of started high school as Alice, based on real girls that I've met and I know. And, now that she's sort of 17, 18 years old, she's kind of a bit over it. And actually what's troubling her is the fact she's got this huge crush on this girl, Bunny. And obviously that was, the first thing I thought when I was in that museum exhibit. I was like, God, what if she wasn't just curious? What if she was bi-curious? And so straight away that that was like, great, so she's going to fancy both boys and girls. And what if she did fall in love with a girl called Bunny? And really that was the starting point. And actually it was maybe the next day that I was like, what if she was trans? Like, could she be trans? Does that impact on her? Does that make a difference? And initially I was quite bolshy about it. And I was going to be like, yeah, she just doesn't care. She doesn't mention the fact she's trans. But then I was like, yeah, but Juno, you're trans. So you know better than anyone that actually being trans underpins everything you do. You know, it's constantly never very far from your mind. And being trans can be really exhausting because we live in a very transphobic society. So I was like, why would Alice be any different? You know, she lives in the same world that you do, and she's 17, so she hasn't got maybe the same thick skin that I've got as well. So to say that initially her being trans wasn't going to be an issue, it's always there, you know, at every step of her journey. It's almost like, you know, it's almost like running an app on your phone. Her own awareness of the fact she's trans is always on in the background and always slightly draining her batteries, which is true of being trans, I think.
Yeah, and it's part of the reason she's such a wonderful character, and the response to her has been, you know, been so wonderful. She's so smart. She's so sort of snarky. She's so witty. She's, you know, riotous. She's unruly. She's she's so drawn, so real. She's such a wonderful Alice character. But, you know, when she heads off to Wonderland, you know, she's got her Doc Martens on, you know, you've got her in this blue Vivienne Westwood dress, you know, with the whole kind of like Alice look that she's going on that you put together so well. But she's so vulnerable. And, you know, she's setting off into this world where she's a gatecrasher, you know, where she's expecting to be away for a night and she's going to be away for 3 weeks, where people in Wonderland are predatory. No spoilers, but, you know, there are predatory, dangerous people in Wonderland. There's a, you know, shadowy Alice in her own mind. You know, she hasn't got her meds. It's terrifying, you know, and I was thinking, is this, you know, your Alice is really having to deal with grown-up issues, isn't she?
Yeah, and that's again partly based on, I think, my own experience of, especially looking back to the first maybe year of my transition, where I felt like really invincible. And it's only now, several years on, that I realised I was incredibly vulnerable. And at the time, I didn't realize, you know, my friends in the first year or so of my transition, you know, I went from being very reckless with my personal safety. You know, I would just leave a club in London and just walk home from Vauxhall in the middle of the night. All of a sudden, I noticed my friends started putting me in taxis. And I was like, oh gosh, how sweet of them, you know, kind of like to make sure I get home safe. But they had seen something, you know, which I didn't, which is, you know, people out there can be really horrible to trans people. So, and they picked up on that. And I think Alice, she's fiercely clever. She's bored. She's a little bit aloof and she's a little bit superior. But I don't think she realizes quite how vulnerable she is. And I think there's a point in the book, as you go into like the last third of the book, where she realizes she's completely by herself because everybody else at Wonderland is a very different species to her, not just because she's trans, but also because she isn't from the elite. She isn't from old money. Her mum is nouveau riche, which is something that I wanted to kind of explore as well.
And it's also such a universal theme of teen fiction or YA fiction, or, you know, and beyond, this idea of, you know, finding your tribe. You know, it was one of the big themes for Alice is, you know, it's her search to find her tribe. Is this a book about finding your tribe?
Somewhat, maybe not so much as previous books, which that has very much been a feature of some of my work, because obviously it was finding my tribe that really changed my life. And I think I sort of did that twice, once in high school and then once when I moved to Brighton. I think what Alice, because and I think, you know, we don't write in a vacuum. I mean, I do know writers who take themselves off to these little cottages in the middle of nowhere with no Wi-Fi. I am not that writer. So, you know, I am plugged in constantly to social media and I'm plugged into the news. And, you know, I was writing this book in the run-up to a general election. And I think it sort of filtered in. I didn't quite realise it was filtering in that Alice, given that we have so little to go on with who she is, that I was like, she goes to Wonderland, she just follows a rabbit for no reason. It just like catches her eye. And then she inserts herself into this whole big drama with the Queen of Hearts, even though it has nothing to do with her. And I was thinking, well, then why would she do that? And I sort of thought, well, is she a bit of a social justice warrior? And does she just have an incredibly well-defined moral compass? And so she tries to save the Knave of Hearts because it's the right thing to do. And that felt really political as well. And it chimed with kind of that very young movement behind Corbyn. There's very, very young sort of teenage girls who recognise that Jeremy Corbyn offered a real political shift in a way that we hadn't really seen a political shift for maybe 25, 30 years, because David Cameron and Tony Blair were basically the same human. And so Corbyn, whether you loved him or hate him, I think everybody would agree he was something new. And that was quite exciting, I think, to young voters. And so that's kind of who she is. And by the end of the book, because it takes place over 3 days, so by the end of the book, she goes back to school. Again, no spoilers. She goes back to school, and the story almost starts again. But the difference is now she knows who she is, and I think she finds her tribe, but it's more about her finding herself, I guess.
Yeah, and one of the tags for the book is, searching for self in a toxic age. And I took that to mean not understanding the kind of like political context you've just given it. I really took that to mean she was finding herself in the time of social media. She was finding herself in terms of constantly being fed these kind of like images of other people being in groups and her being excluded. And I just wanted, but when you were writing about a toxic age, it really felt like it was the kind of the political context that she was in.
Yeah, I think because I'm very, very wary about writing about sort of social media. I think Instagram is mentioned, and obviously there is the caterpillar, which I love. When you just sort of, you're quite proud of yourself and you're excellent. I like that.
Juno, explain the caterpillar app.
The caterpillar, because obviously when as an author you are given a talking wise caterpillar to work around, I was like, well, I can't really do that. I can't, unless she gets really, really off her face on drugs. She's not going to talk to a caterpillar. So I created an app called Caterpillar, which enables the young and upwardly mobile youth of London to take sort of secret voyeuristic pictures of each other and post them to this app, causing scandal and gossip. So it's a little bit like Gossip Girl, but I did sort of think, well, where would, Gossip Girl now wouldn't be a website, like who uses forums, I mean, Christ. So it's kind of like, sort of like a cross between Gossip Girl and Grindr or Snapchat, I guess. And that's how the caterpillar came to be. And the best thing about creating my own fake social media is that it's never going to date. Like, I think I get the vibe that TikTok has kind of replaced Snapchat. Snapchat kind of replaced Facebook. Social media evolves really, really fast. So I'm never going to do a novel kind of that's about Instagram, because we don't really know how long Instagram is going to be around.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was really interesting with Caterpillar is this idea of shame and being seen, but also with privilege being such a theme in the book as well. I just thought it was really interesting that this is probably the first generation where you were able to see into people's lives on such a scale in a way that you haven't. There's always been kind of like an element of rich girls at school, but just this week, and my stepdaughter was here, and with everything that was going on, she was looking at her social media and saying, and still the rich girls at school are putting pictures of them on their boats.
That's not the one. I mean, people need to read the room. I mean, one of my favourite accounts this week in the middle of real societal uprising and change, which has been really positive, has been the Instagram account Influencers in the Wild, which, if you do not subscribe to Influencers in the Wild, treat yourself, which has been sort of like candid footage of influencers trying to get pictures of themselves at Black Lives Matter marches, which is so disgusting and so tone deaf and so not what those marches are about. But there's been rumours as well of sort of some quite high profile celebrities just nipping down to the march, having a picture so everyone can see them being at a march, and then them pissing off home before the march actually starts. So there are spies everywhere, and in the social media age, you know, we're always being watched. It's very, very. I mean, it's an overused allegory, but it's very Big Brother.
Which is why your caterpillar app within the book really caught something in the zeitgeist.
Thank you. Yeah, I've copyrighted it, so people can. So I am the owner of Caterpillar before anybody gets any ideas. So.
Okay, so Juno, we're gonna take a quick sort of 10-minute break now, so people can have a think about questions they want to ask you about your previous work, about Wonderland, or about writing the book. And so thank you very much. It's now a chance to get yourself something to drink, to relax, or a cup of tea, or some more crisps. We all know crisps power lockdown. And we're back with Juno in 10 minutes. Thank you. Hello, and welcome back. I've just been talking to Juno about Freaks and Geeks. Thank you for reminding me about that incredible series. Juno, hello.
Hi.
So we've got a question from Molly. Hello, Molly. And the question is, do you think that we return to these sort of teen series or these teen stories because the feeling is so intense the first time it happens to us?
Very much, yeah. And I think it's really universal as well. I think, when you are a teenager, not only are you dealing with first love, first heartbreak, first bereavement, but you haven't built up any of the coping strategies that we use in adult life. So everything feels just incredibly raw. I also think there is a certain exotic appeal. And I think it works both ways. I think as Brits, we have a very romantic view of American high schools with cheerleaders and jocks and all those tropes. And then I think, American readers think we all go to kind of like Mallory Towers style boarding schools, which I have completely exploited with St. Agnes. I very much created this world slightly thinking, well, this is what Americans think we do anyway, so we might as well.
I know. On the first couple of days of lockdown, I watched a whole series of the BBC's new series of Mallory Towers. It's just
My friend wrote that. My friend Sasha was one of the writers on that, so I will pass that on.
oh, thank you. Just loved it, but it was so comforting, and just and I think that whole excitement that Mallory Towers really caught the imagination. It was really in the reading you gave. You mentioned Mallory Towers as well.
But I think it did phenomenally well as well. It did really, really well. It kind of landed on iPlayer the first week of lockdown, so it got enormous viewership.
No, it was brilliant. It was just absolutely amazing escapism, and it's such powerful storytelling. And I think you're right. I think when you don't go to boarding school, it's such a part of the British culture that you're kind of just a little bit obsessed by it. And midnight feasts have such a magicness when you're younger. We've got a question. It's a private question, and. It is. Juno, thank you so much for such an interesting discussion. My question is, and we thought a question about J.K. Rowling would come up. My question is, given J.K. Rowling's now very overt and public transphobia, which cis readers are increasingly becoming aware of, do you think there's a place for new trans or pro-trans writers to reoccupy the wizarding genre?
100%. Yeah, I think, those books which were great, they're not gonna magically transform to become more inclusive. People almost seem to keep waiting for that book to become more diverse, and they're never gonna, because that series finished like what, 15 years ago or something, a long time ago. But I think something to remember is that J.K. Rowling did not create wizards and witches. That there have been The Worst Witch, and there's been a gazillion other stories about witches and wizards, and even schools of witches and wizards. And so I think, and there have been really good books since as well. So I think there's, in the way that I was able to take Alice in Wonderland, the notion of magic and witchcraft and wizardry, it's there for any writer to explore. And I would heartily encourage people to do that.
Wizarding next, do you think, Juno?
For me, not absolutely next. I'm working on some TV shows at the moment. None of them have witches or wizards. That's not true. That's an absolute lie. I'm literally working on a TV show about witches and wizards. I wrote one myself. I wrote a novella called Grave Matter, and I'm adapting it for television at the moment. So Grave Matter kind of looks at sort of the roots of where hoodoo and voodoo and vodun come from, and sort of looking around those kind of magics and looking at that sort of stuff. So, like I said, it's there for us all to weave into our novels.
Yeah, and a brilliant answer that you're actually doing it as well. So fantastic answer to that question.
Yeah, I mean, the one show we've not talked about is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is possibly the most impactful piece of culture that has really had on my writing. And so, I know they're rebooting Buffy apparently at the same time. I'm not doing that, but I would love to do more teen supernatural stuff, because that's what I grew up on.
I mentioned in the beginning that Clean, Meat Market and Wonderland have been optioned, this week. Congratulations.
Yay.
Hey, well done. I had a sneaky question though. Have you kind of imagined who might play Alice or Paisley or Bunny?
No. So with the teen cast, I would love to do that thing that a lot of the great TV shows about teenagers on, which is uncover a really fresh new cast of new faces. One of my least favorite things is occupying teen dramas with 20 somethings. I think it
Looking
it
at
just
you,
never.
Beverly Hills 90210, right?
Well, and Rizza from Greece. I mean, Rizza from Greece is the ultimate 30-year-old teenager, I think. And I was always really confused that I didn't understand that Rizza was meant to be a teenager. Sometimes I think about who I would like for the adult characters more. And so when I go to meetings with production companies, I'm much more able to sort of say, what about, like, for example, in Clean, I always had one eye on Gillian Anderson as Lady Denham. I would have loved Rob Delaney to be Dr. Goldstein. So yeah, there's ideas all around, but for the teen cast, I just want the best young talent.
There's going to be a really exceptional opportunity for a young actor to play Paisley. We didn't get to talk about her. Paisley is the sort of the baddie, the Queen of Hearts character in Wonderland. And I wanted to ask you about Paisley. Was it magic being able? I mean, Paisley is wielding a croquet manner in a way that you just don't want someone to wield one. She's sort of like nightmare-inducing kind of levels of terror. Was she really good fun to write?
Oh, absolutely. It was, and she was a real carrot on a stick, which is I didn't want to bring her in too soon. And so, at that point, where as an author, sometimes you can start to feel a bit kind of like, oh, there's no way out. Like you're about sort of 25,000 words in, you're just like, oh my God, I still have like 70,000 words left to do. That's when I brought in Paisley. So when I knew that I might start to find the writing process hard, that's when I knew it was time to bring in the Queen of Hearts. And, when you're taking a character who is so ridiculously over the top, that was really good fun but then I sort of figured, and I don't know if people have been watching that Jeffrey Epstein documentary on Netflix, which is painful and uncomfortable, but I think people should watch it. It's a timely reminder that these people are not real people. They live in a world that regular humans do not occupy. We should abolish billionaires. It shouldn't be allowed. And Paisley is a billionaire. So of course she's ridiculous. She has a private jet. She's ridiculous.
Yeah, and you could almost have, you much more fun of making her as ridiculous as possible because you were in Wonderland. Were you able to sort of play around with reality a lot more because you were in Wonderland?
Yeah, I mean, the way I did it was through narcotics. I've never said my books are for kids. It's young adult, and everybody gets very stuck on the young and kind of ignores the adult. Clean and Meat Market and Wonderland, all three of them deal with some really, really adult things. And so through the fact that Alice definitely goes on a bit of a 3-day bender, that helped to play with her perceptions of reality in the first place. But more's the point, to me it was scarier to have these gorgeous socialites like trying to literally kill each other off, and then sort of think, oh, that's ridiculous. But then again, you look at what some of the richest people in our society are getting away with in plain sight. Why isn't Prince Andrew in a jail cell? I mean, come on, let's just say it. And that's when you realise that's what makes it really scary, which is it looks ridiculous, but actually it's not.
Yeah, actually, we have got. I think I mentioned we've got the reviewer who did the lovely review at Heat magazine of Wonderland. She's in the room tonight. Say hello to Lisa.
Oh, Lisa, thank you so much. When I was at university, every single Tuesday, I used to go out and buy Heat magazine, and my flatmates thought I was ridiculous for spending my money on Heat. And so I know you shouldn't play favourites, but when my novels, Clean and Wonderland, have been reviewed in Heat, and I keep those ones.
Hooray! Thanks, Lisa. It's a great review. But one of the things that I thought she picked up on so brilliantly was this idea that, you know, it's a young adult novel, but you know, the themes are adult. You know, as you say, it covers drugs, you know, sex, you know, self-harm. You know, the Tweedledum Tweedledee characters. You know, very unusual type of character find in a young adult novel. And so, you know, do you think that, you know, were you writing for the YA plus audience, for the fact that, you know, that, you know, a lot of people who read YA novels are, you know, in their 20s and beyond? Or do you think publishers really haven't quite got that crossover YA market understood in a way that it really is? Or did you want to develop that do you want to develop YA as a genre?
I think there's room for all of us, and I think that YA is a very expansive term that covers a lot of books. You know, in that general section of the bookshop, you know, you can have that sort of the younger stuff going down to like Robin Stevens, but then you know, you've got everything in the middle with sort of, and then building up to where the top end, where you kind of got authors like myself and Louisa Neal and Kevin Brooks kind of doing the more sort of top end stuff with like Patrick Ness as well. And there's room for everyone. I think, you know, we've always been very forthcoming. You know, I don't want to say we put warnings on my books, but I think we certainly say not suitable for younger readers. But at the same time, you know, we know, and I think we have to be really, really honest, because I don't think it does anybody any favours to pretend that 9, 10, 11-year-old, 12-year-olds don't have smartphones and aren't seeing things that we just were not seeing. And I think there is a very definite divide between the pre-broadband generation and the post-broadband, or the digital natives. And the problem is that we, as the grown-ups, we remember our sort of teenage years for what they were, and we can't truly understand what it's like to be a digital native. So we can, you know, my publishers, we can worry about, oh my gosh, is this suitable for children? But there is nothing in Wonderland that an 11-year-old can't see on their phone. And we've got to acknowledge that, because otherwise we're kind of leaving young adults to the mercy of the internet, which is a cesspit. So we've got to be one step ahead, basically.
Yeah, it's a beautiful answer. And you can really see that Wonderland is holding up a mirror to how teens are, rather than how we want them to be for their own sake. It's such a dangerous position to be in.
Very much trouble for that as well. Like, I'm not going to name names, but there are certain forums on certain websites who are baying for my blood because I'm reckless and I'm terrible and, you know, I'm writing filth or whatever. And I'm just like, go home and watch Euphoria. You know, that's what teenage life is like. And I think that's why Euphoria was so brutal, because it really didn't shy away from the lived experiences of teenagers. And actually Hunter Schafer's character of Jules is the most realistic depiction of a trans character I've seen. And it's, you know, I think when you watch Euphoria, and I would strongly advise everybody should watch Euphoria, you know, Jules is in real peril, like real peril. And I think her experience is shared by a lot of other trans youth, I think.
And part of that teen experience is searching out stories that reflect you. That's why stories are so important.
And yeah, and that's, you know, I think teenage readers, or any readers, we're all really, really good at self-editing. Like, if I sit down with a book, I will know within the first 2 or 3 pages if it's going to be for me. And I think teenagers do the same as well. And I think we saw this around 50 Shades of Grey. So my debut came out the same year as 50 Shades. And because everyone was talking about this incredibly sort of risque novel, of course teenagers got hold of copies. And some of them read it and were like, this is trash. And some of them were just like, oh, no, not for me. I think wherever you're at, readers are really, really good at deciding whether they are ready for a book or not, or whether that book is going to be for them. And, you know, when I was a teenager, given that YA wasn't really available to me in the 90s, you know, I really did. I split my time between Judy Blume and Nancy Drew, and then Stephen King and Dean Koontz. And so, you know, I was very able to decide what was for me and what wasn't.
Thank you. We've got a question from Matthew. Hello, Matthew. And he says, "Hi, Juno. I'm loving Wonderland so far. Can you tell me which book you've enjoyed writing the most and why?"
I always say this, I get this a lot. And usually I say either Say Her Name, which was my 2013 novel, I think, which was just so fun. I felt with my second novel, Cruel Summer, I'd sort of proved myself in a way as a writer. And so for my third novel, I just wanted to just have fun. And I set myself one task, and that was to write the scariest YA novel that I'd ever read. And that was incredibly freeing. And I still love Say Her Name so much. And the other one is Clean, where I just, again, had that same sort of sense of freedom. I was bored of playing by the rules. I was bored of writing the books I thought I should be writing. And so I was just, I think Clean, and I think you can really sense this when you read Clean, there's just the biggest fuck it in the world. That whole novel was me saying fuck it. I was out of contract. I had left my agency. I didn't have anybody looking over my shoulder or breathing down my neck. And for the first time, maybe, I just really, really read a book that I didn't care if nobody else liked it. I knew that I liked it. And I'm still awfully, awfully fond of Clean, which is, of course, why I ended up back in St Agnes with Wonderland. So.
And I hear that a lot from writers who write, adult fiction or non-fiction. This idea that it can be incredibly freeing just to write the book that you want to write, but it can be really difficult to have the confidence to do it. You really are out there, and it's an incredible undertaking to do it. But it's really empowering to hear writers who have done it, and it's their favourite book.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's interesting because obviously it's too soon to say how Wonderland will do, but it's funny that my two best-selling novels, by some margin, are Clean and Say Her Name. So there you go.
You talked about what you're writing next. You did mention that kind of like, you're doing some television and you're doing another adaptation. But in terms of your next novel, you did mention you're going to be writing about grief. Is that right? Is there going to be a novel coming?
A little bit. I mean, if my publisher's listening to this, I'm about to get myself into so much trouble.
Oh, sorry.
Possibly I need a year off. I've had 10 novels in 10 years. And now I feel very pulled and pushed around between the TV projects and my novels. And it's strange because obviously had I been touring Wonderland this year, I think I would have been on the verge of a nervous breakdown now, because I would have also still been writing my TV show while on tour. So actually, the fact that I'm not touring has meant that actually I've been able to focus on my scripts. But I might need some time. The next novel isn't where it should be at this stage. But what I will say is that we've left St Agnes. There isn't going to be a fourth part. Not yet. We'll see. I never say never. But for now, we've left St Agnes behind. It's going to be a standalone. And for now, it has much more of a thriller vibe. And it's so far away. It's so far away. That's all I'll say for now.
Oh, thank you, Juno. And thank you, Matthew, for getting such a great question. And we'll find out what Juno's up to next. We've got a question, another private question. And this is, Juno, if you don't mind answering, do you personally think it's easy to draw a distinction or possible to draw a distinction between problematic artists and their work?
That is such a big... We could almost do a whole hour on that. I think it's down to individuals. I think, and I remember once having a really, really fraught conversation with the other DJ at my club night about whether or not we should play Michael Jackson. I was like, really, no, I don't think we should. I think, this music is now cancelled, whereas the other DJ was like, but this music was not written by him. It was written by Quincy Jones, and there were musicians on it who were not Michael Jackson, and there were backing singers on it who were not Michael Jackson. And it's really, really difficult. And so all we could agree to do was disagree, and I think, when I'm in that DJ booth, I'm still not going to be playing Michael Jackson. But because I'm a massive hypocrite, I would play David Bowie, who we know David Bowie was sleeping with underage girls, and we completely turn a blind eye to that. And so it's kind of, it just has to come down to individual people, I think. But, I think it's a bit like sort of offsetting your carbon footprint. I think wherever possible, support artists who are making and creating positive change in the world. None of us are perfect. There's no such thing. None of us. We're all going to fuck up. But, you can look for those people who are helping, and you can look for those people who are using their voices wisely.
It's such a big question for the time. Thank you so much. Juno, we're coming to the end of our time together. I just wanted to mention that, through reading your book and kind of really focusing on, YA and, real stories from a sort of teen experience, it really struck me that, being in your teens is almost a bit of a lawless time. You step away from the protection of hopefully the protection of your family, not for everyone, but step away from your childhood, and you're stepping into a totally chaotic wonderland where nothing really makes sense, and you've got to find your way through. And I think
you're absolutely right. I think I remember once, and I've taken this advice clearly to heart, I can still remember it. An author came to visit my school when we were 14, and somebody said, so what are your tips for writing teen fiction? And she went, get rid of the parents, because if the parents are there, nothing very exciting is going to happen. And she's completely right. It has to be about what happens when you step into the world.
And there is you've got to find your own anchors and your own way through. And you've written that so beautifully with the way Alice navigates Wonderland, and it is a brilliant book.
Available in all good bookshops. Support an independent bookshop, or you can buy it through you. I believe we can buy it. You can buy it right now.
Yes, you can buy it from us if you would like it. Do email me, and if you've paid £5 for the ticket, I'll take that off the price of the book, and we'll get that to you. I'm really happy to do it. We love authors, and we have set up as a bookseller because no one needs to be a trillionaire. No one needs to. No. We can. There's plenty of room for independent books sellers, which we are, and it's got a neon pink bunny on the front. So what more do you want?
Exactly.
So, Juno, thank you so much for being at Book Club Live. It's been such a pleasure, and congratulations on your digital launch. Congratulations. This non-alcoholic cocktail says congratulations on Wonderland, and I'm very looking forward to seeing it being a multi-award-winning best-selling book. Thank you, Juno.
Take care. Good night, everyone.
Thank you so much for being part of Book Club Live to celebrate Juno's book, Wonderland. It's been such a pleasure to spend Sunday night with you. We're going to be doing a lot of Book Club Lives over the summer, so please do join us for another one. This Book Club Live is now closed.